Good man. Looks like we are live. Thank you to all the one person that's watching. Not yet, but just in case. I'm being optimistic that maybe one person will join and watch. In any case, I definitely wanted to just today talk about RFIs, RFPs, and RFQs. So request for information, request for proposal, and request for quoting. So these are definitely some very important parts in building volume and building opportunity as a freight broker. Also, it is very important that shippers do it the right way. So when they do it the right way, they can definitely go about it the right way to get the right quotes and proposals and quotations back. So the first part, again, request for information. The purpose of the request for information really is to gather the information about the qualifications of the candidates that you will be potentially selecting to move your freight and handle your logistics, to handle your freight spend. Obviously, you want to look at the capabilities of your potential candidates, and you want to look at the services offered by carriers and logistics service providers that are interested eventually to bid on your freight. And also, the request for information is not a request for a proposal or for a quote. So it doesn't obligate you as a shipper to any carrier or logistics service provider. It's essentially just a request for information for capabilities and service. So you can use a request for information RFI to determine which companies you can invite to your RFP, which is your request for a proposal. So to invite them in that stage, you'd want to see, who would be capable of handling your business. So you'd want to include current providers, and you'd want to include new candidates to the selection process as well. You want to kind of look at your network. You want to do some online research. You want to look through LinkedIn as well, see what kind of potential better service offerings there are out there for you, in comparison to your current service providers, whether that's me or someone else. So essentially for business purposes, for more efficient supply chain, especially in the logistics part of the supply chain, it's best to kind of see what's out there. And in terms of best practices, kind of switching your carriers, rotating them throughout your supply chain logistics needs, and expanding that network to your qualified new vendors or service providers will help you build credibility and increase your reach in the marketplace for what you are shipping as well. And again, an RFI it comes before the RFP, which is the request for proposal. And then the request for proposal with that can be followed by RFQ, which is a request for quotation. In terms of the request for quotation, while RFP and RFQ, it's kind of used interchangeably in our industry in logistics. They're rather different. So an RFQ can either come as a part of an RFP or as a separate form to be filled out. And the separate RFQs are usually used when you're requesting a service that's like standardized. So an example, you're shipping something, from London to Detroit, Michigan. So London, Ontario to Detroit, Michigan, or from Windsor to Chicago, Illinois, or for basic commodities where you're just looking to mainly select a service provider based off of solely price. That's what an RFQ is usually for. So in summary, an RFQ is usually used as an award to stand for like a standardized service, like on a regular lane or a spot quote that may need to be shipped out. As for request for proposal, this is kind of the longest part. Request for proposal, it's really just a formal invitation to your providers or your potential candidates to provide detailed proposals for meeting your shipping needs. And it's very important that you be specific about what you need in your request for proposal. So, again, a bad RFP is not really efficient. It can be messy and incomplete. It can kind of give you just more questions instead of providing you answers. And it really is a waste of time. And even at times, it's a waste of your capital investing in these resources if what you are getting back from it or taking from it is worse than what you're putting in. So a typical RFP can be broken down into 3 general sections. So you have your information that you will give to your potential candidates or current providers, and then you'll have your information that you request from your providers, and you'll also have additional information that may be added to this, such as bid forms for certain lanes as well. And it usually takes roughly 3 to 4 hours to review a good, solid proposal. So you want to just kind of avoid trying to send this out to like way too many providers, because it can definitely be overwhelming when these things come back. So they might even be a little bit like carriers and providers that you reach out to. They might not want to even request if they feel that, or they see that you have sent this out to, thousands upon thousands of providers. It might not be as efficient as you might want it to be in that case. And RFPs have one thing that's really kind of equal across the board. They really do give you the necessary information to get you the best quality from your potential candidates, the best quality information, the best quality return on your investment and your resources. So a successful set of responses is really kind of accomplished if you give an RFP that gives you the ability to collect this information, and it allows the carrier to, or logistics service provider, to communicate exactly how they would be able to assist you in moving or distributing your freight. And then this is best attained by having a sort of legible and understandable and structural network or framework in terms of how you propose this. So it can be done really by following simple rules or simple kind of template to get it done. So the one that kind of comes to mind first is introduction. So you want to kind of take a second to make sure you introduce your company to us as potential bidders, service providers, and you want to give us kind of a background in terms of what you guys are all about, so we as the service providers can better understand our shippers and your logistics needs. So you want to kind of answer some questions. Is your freight steady? Why do you serve your customers or your end users? Is your business a cyclical business? If you kind of provide an understanding or kind of a quick rundown, or even a long rundown really, of your products, materials, and commodities that you need assistance in transporting, it'll help us better give you the solutions and provide solutions that all partners or all people involved in that transaction can be better suited for it, and be happy about the fact that they can serve you and help you provide your products, your materials, your commodities to the customer, end user, or further down your supply chain, whatever the case may be. So the introduction is important. The next thing also is, what exactly do you need out of this as a business? if you give us kind of an outline summary of your business needs, it'll help us as providers deliver better solutions, like I just mentioned, and it matches you up with the best service providers within that niche. And in return, you'll minimize your risk. So you'll minimize the risk of awarding potential contracts to providers that may not be the right fit. I mean, there was just something in the news lately in regards to food that needs to be distributed to needing families that are really in need of this food. And so the supply chain for this has been delayed because the government awarded contracts to a company that was like a wedding and a catering company that kind of just organized a few events. They didn't really have a full system and network that was needed in order to do this. They didn't have the proper distribution network to do this. So this is where you can run into trouble and problems if you don't do your homework. So as a shipper, do your homework and understand what your provider is looking. That doesn't mean or what your provider is providing. So if this doesn't mean that one provider can't support you in one niche that you may need assistance in transportation, but it can mean that they may not fit in another niche where you need help as well. So you make sure you see who, what, when, where, why, how, all of that is answered in this business needs section, really. And also, if you're operating in a kind of a time critical freight model where you need freight to move just in time, it's very important that you pick the right partners on each of these regions and each of these lanes and each of these markets that you would need assistance in. If you need freight that's going into ports, well, you got to make sure you have people that can do it on time. In automotive, we have production lines that go down, so we got to make sure that we're on time for delivery. I've had a few scenarios where I wasn't late by much in terms of my carriers being late, but 17 minutes can be a long time if you're waiting on parts on a line shutdown. So I was a few times, once was 17 minutes and once was 45 minutes late. And that caused panic, confusion, lots of phone calls, lots of emails, lots of swearing and yelling into my ear for the delays. So again, this isn't a slate against me, but it is definitely an issue that can arise if we don't pick people that can respond to our issues and respond to our requests as a shipper, or again, our requests as a provider. Another thing you can run into is if there's something that needs to go to a site on site and your delivery is late. Did you do the right steps to initiate the correct responses? Did you do the right steps to select the right carriers, to select the right logistics service providers, to make sure that does not happen, or if it does happen, it's so minuscule that you don't even notice. Another thing, if you're opening up something, another one of your locations for your organization, you want to make sure things are on time. You want to make sure that if there's accessorial fees that will be charged to you if things don't show up on time. Well, why did they not show up on time? So you got to make sure you select the carriers and providers that can make sure to promise you your schedules as you requested as a shipper. So with exceptions, of course, with delays in transit in terms of construction and, God forbid, any kind of accidents ahead of the people that are transporting your freight, drivers and such. Just doing your due diligence to make sure that things that can be avoided are avoided will go a long way. In terms of things that are a must for a RFP, it's a lot of work when you receive responses back from your potential candidates. So you need to have really a list of these requirements that can be used to easily qualify or disconnect or disqualify a company that's potentially bidding on your freight. So if you require any technology or if you want to say technological requirements, you got to make sure you state that in your RFP that you're requesting API or EDI capable providers. You want to make sure that you state that. You want to make sure that if your commodities or potentially your locations require certain licenses or certain requirements, certifications, that you state that well before any kind of bidding takes place or selection process takes place. You want to make sure that you ask for a claims letter or rate from your providers. You want to make sure that they give you their insurance certificates, or if not their insurance certificates, then insurance certificates of their selected carriers if they are service providers. You want to make sure you look at their liabilities in their insurance agreements. So again, keep all this stuff on file. Make sure you keep all your definitions on file. Make sure all parties have a copy and an understanding of what is needed. And these requirements are a must if you want to do it the right way. In terms of if you didn't do a request for information, you should definitely use a kind of like a pre-qualification list or form or a set of questions that you can send out to your potential candidates. You can ask for their business history. Who do they do business with? Companies and a report. It doesn't have to be all of their customers, but at least a nice kind of overview of what their business history has been like. You can ask for their area or region that they serve best. Ask for their size of fleet, their network size. You can ask, again, network size is for your logistics service providers. You can ask to see their certifications. You can also ask about their insurance coverage in that kind of like pre-qualification list, and see how they respond to risk management. Ask for their protocols on risk management. Ask about their continuous kind of expansion in knowledge commitment, and getting a better understanding of how they respond to corrective action. Do they have a protocol for corrective action? How do they go about that with you as their customer? These are all pre-qualification things that you can ask in order to be better served by your potential candidates. Sorry about that. One sec. It keeps falling out of my ear. Also, you should make sure that you have your payment and billing terms within your contracts and within your RFP that you sent out. And you should also have your conditions that are sent out in your general terms, so your GTC. You should also have you should have your SLA, and also kind of a timeline of the contract, how long it's going to be. And you should also have your SOP added in there. So your standard operating procedures, you should definitely have in there. I mean, I've went as far as if I send out a load confirmation to a carrier, to attach an SOP to the load confirmation, printer friendly, of course. Actually, in other words, send it as a PDF document. So that way they don't have to print it out, but they can definitely send it over to their drivers and their network, so they can see exactly how you folks operate over at the shipping locations that you have. So you want to make sure you include your rules, your definitions for your rules, your accessorial rules, your technology requirement rules, your on-time pickup, late pickup, on-time delivery, late delivery, your rejection rate rules, exception rate, acceptance rate rules. You want to make sure you have that all in your contract to make sure that everybody is on the same page. And again, I'm repeating myself, but to have this copy and send it out it's just way better, especially if you have to negotiate anything with your providers. You find the perfect candidate, but you want to just they want to negotiate something in the terms, or you want to negotiate something in terms of what they redlined or clauses they redlined in the contract. It just makes it easier to do that. You also want to make sure that you provide in there kind of what, when, how much, where, all of those kind of freight details that are needed in order to provide the best potential bid and price in the contract negotiation that takes place. So you want to make sure you include your, I guess, your average weight per load, your cargo value that's needed, any kind of equipment types that are needed, the commodity type, whether this is seasonal freight or variable freight, whatever the case may be, you want to include that. You want to make sure you have all your zip codes in there, from your origin zip codes, destination zip codes, and also the volume for each lane and the frequency that these shipments happen. So those are all things that are very, very much needed for us to provide the best rates and the best solutions for your needs. Also, you should make your bid sheet easy to read. You should make it that it has all the details that are needed per basis. You should have your fuel surcharge schedule in there, either your own or the one that's provided based off of the Department of Energy's fuel surcharge that comes out every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Central. So you want to make sure you know how you're going to be going about those rates that you get back. Are you going to want your providers to have an all-in rate? Are you going to want them to provide you with a rate per mile, with the fuel included, all in, or just excluded? So how are you going to tackle that? That's up to you as the shipper, but again, that should be included in there, that schedule. Your accessorials as well. So again, I did a few videos regarding accessorials, so we won't get into them, but essentially, if you're going to be providing accessorials for your shipments, detention or whatever else is needed, you make sure you include the definitions for those and include the rates that you are willing to pay for each, so that way everybody's on the same page. And you also want to make sure you have a timeline. You want to make sure you have your timeline for your request for proposal, just to keep things professional. So you want to have your opening date for your bids. You want to have your due date for your questions, potentially a webinar or conference call, or a phone call with potential suppliers, or vendors. You want to have a deadline for your first kind of bid due date submission. So you want to make sure you've been giving your potential candidates a time frame of when they can put their bid proposals together for you. And you want to make sure you have a date where it's set for your questions that they may have, or if you're providing any questions regarding the bids that have come in, you can provide that as well. You want to have your kind of a second date for the submission of the bids. You also want to have final dates for any kind of negotiations that need to take place. You want to have a notice of award date. You want to have your go live date set as well, and you want to have your contract commitment and any kind of additional information regarding contract needed. So that's definitely some of the things that you need to keep in mind when you're doing your timeline and going about it that way. And in terms of the whole process, you just want to make sure that you have your clear kind of requirements, submission, and rules and effects. And if you're going to be, you can send it out via email, you can send it out via any kind of web-based portals that are used, TMS systems or whatever it may be, or if you're using a 4PL, 3PL, or potentially a consultant to do this kind of work for you. You want to just make sure that everything is submitted equally to all parties, so everybody's kind of on the same page. And you also want to make sure that you understand, if you're doing kind of more rounds of bidding, that you tell everybody involved in the bidding whether the people that are already serve you will be included in the first round of bids, or if they will be held off until the second round of bids if they've been doing a good job for you. If you're being honest with us as service providers, the transparency is only going to help the relationship grow. It's only going to help with better solutions. I mean, if we're not transparent or you're not transparent, it's not going to go anywhere. You want to make sure you understand your KPIs that you're requesting of your potential providers. So you want to make sure you attach a copy of your KPIs to them, so they know what to look for. They know how to approach you and how to deal with you on a business level. This is very important. And also, back to the planning part of it, you want to make sure that you sit down with everybody involved in making these decisions, so you can have a better understanding of what you're trying to get out of this RFP. And you just want to make sure that you know what you're after with the RFP, and that all the parties or potential candidates involved in getting this information is beneficial to all people involved. So you want to ask yourself some questions. You want to ask, again, what are you trying to accomplish with this RFP? What are your goals in terms of what you're trying to save on the budget? How you're going to be using the KPIs to measure the effectiveness of the providers. What are you looking for in terms of efficiency? What your requirements are in terms of technology. Again, we talked about the rounds of bidding. So how many rounds you're going to have, to be transparent with that, having a plan in terms of how many rounds you want to have in there. Will this be like based off of invitation, or will this be a request for proposal, open bid for everybody and anybody? You want to make sure that you have your timeline and your due date set. You want to know who's going to be there to manage those responses when they do come in. And you want to know how you're going to evaluate them when they come in, and how you're going to be giving these lanes to this providers that have expressed interest in working with you and working for you in a sense. You also want to know what you're looking to achieve with it in terms of adding potential providers, or are you trying to kind of scale it down to have just a few providers? What your goals are there, and are you looking to do work with a big mix? There's been a lot of talk in the last few months. What's better, asset-based, non-asset-based providers? Don't put your eggs in one basket talk and all that. So just make sure exactly, you have a clear plan and clear goals of what you're looking to accomplish. In terms of the preparation for the request for proposal, once you've kind of answered all those questions for yourself, you need to know your special requirements. You need to know your contract in and out. You need to know your pricing kind of templates that you're looking to do, and your cost structure. You want to know your KPIs. You want to know kind of your volumes. It doesn't have to be now to that load, but I mean, estimated freight volumes can go a long way in terms of what someone can do for you in terms of price. So again, those are all very, very important parts for the preparation stage of getting your RFP ready. And so after everything is ready to go, you want to make sure you've looked at it, you reviewed it again, you've asked all the decision makers to look through it and do the right thing in terms of any kind of corrections that need to be made, or anything that's one decision maker may not agree with, that's talked about, and any kind of issues that arise, that they are talked about. And then again, you want to make sure you submit all of this information to your potential candidates, carriers, brokers, 3PLs, 4PLs, whatever you're going to be using, and to have them just give you, if you're doing it by email, to reach out to you and give you the thumbs up that they've received it. So yeah, those are all very, very important parts. And you want to make sure that you read each proposal and that comes in. You want to make sure that you have the selection in front of you, so you know what you're looking for from your carrier, so you don't forget some important parts. And you want to have all of these results in one kind of easy to read location where you can take a look as to how you're going to be awarding your freight. And you just want to make sure you set your selection process meetings with your selected providers, and that all that information is handled. And again, out of all of this, when everybody's on the same page on the capabilities, the service, the offerings, the partnership, the business relationship, once all that is kind of in place, the RFP can be one of the most beneficial parts of your business. And there's a lot of talk about even going so far as to not doing like a annual or long-term contracts, but kind of doing these mini bids where they're going to go on for like, you're trying to lock in capacity for 3 months. So think about how effective you need to have your RFP, RFQ, RFI, and making sure the procedures are in place to make sure that you select the right carriers and the right people involved in making these decisions. So there you have it. I know we ran into 32 minutes of talk about this stuff. There's always something to talk about in this industry. I've been in it now, like I said, a long time, so it doesn't really get boring for me, because you can always talk about something, whether it's improvement processes, better ways of accomplishing your goals as a shipper, or better ways to provide your services as a LSP or carrier. But if we work together and make sure that we are always on the same page, and no one's left in the dark, then we can do a better job of running our supply chains and making sure that the logistics part is running as smoothly as possible. And so, yes, that's all I had for you today for RFI, RFP, RFQ. So if this is something that you found valuable, go ahead and share with people. If you didn't find it valuable, you probably didn't get this far into the talk. So in any case, thank you for the opportunity to talk with everybody and discuss this. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, advice, anything, just give me a shout. You know where to find me. So cheers to everybody on these 33 minutes of talking. Goodbye.